So welcome to the Ryan Magic Show. Today we're here with Dr. Erin, just one of the most gorgeous people that I've had the divine wonder of connecting with at Justin Bieber's mansion, which is where we first met, which is
Uh-huh.
pretty cool. The last interview I did was with Mel Wells, who I also met at Justin
Mm,
Bieber's mansion through Nick. And
yeah.
great people stick together, like-minded people. And you guys are just such a beautiful crew. You're such a beautiful soul. And there's some specific things that I'm really excited to navigate on our conversation today. The trauma release method that you've worked through, but something that came up for me when we were doing our little eye gaze just then and connecting in is I just sense this strength. You've got a real powerful energy. You're
Mm,
gorgeous. You've got that light energy as well, but you've got a really powerful energy. And
mm,
we're talking about some shifts you've made recently in your life to bold moves to move away from something that you have natural attachment to. Can you talk to me about how you reconcile using that strength to make bold decisions to things that you have natural attachment to?
Oh, that's a great one. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me, and I just adore you. And I
Thanks,
love,
guys.
I love the word magic. I think we all need a little bit more magic in our lives for sure.
Appreciate that.
And such a pleasure to be here. So, whoa, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
How do you find the courage? And I think that it's interesting because I remember as we're online and we see all of our influencer friends and whatever. And one of the common kind of courses that people have is finding confidence. Confidence is a big word out there. And I remember being a young, say at 18 years old, I was bulimic. I was beautiful from the outside. I was totally broken on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
totally trying to seek validation in the world, trying to find my way, and thinking that I was going to find something out there. And
Mm-hmm.
I know for sure for me and for all the girls who train that how I found that strength and that courage and that confidence is only one thing and one thing only. And it is connecting through the veil of life to the source of who you are and dying off as the person that I was and being reborn as a higher version of myself that is
Mm-hmm.
untouchable, really and
Yeah,
truly.
that's really
Mhm.
beautiful. And one thing that popped into mind as you were chatting then, uh, have you heard of David Dieter, The
Of
Way of the
course,
Superior
I've
Man?
worked with David Duda.
There you go. Doesn't surprise me.
Hmm.
So I love how David Dieter talks about the three levels of masculinity and femininity. And for the woman, it's like the first level is like a kind of a slutty, I'm giving myself, I'm using my sexuality to take from the world. And the level two is kind of a suppression of that energy, and it's more like I'm going to be a strong woman and I suppress that part of myself. And then lens three is a more radiant version that embraces the femininity and that beauty in a way that's actually giving to the world. And I think
Hmm.
that can only happen through connection with the divine, where and the reason that this popped into my mind is because you are very material still. Like, you have a big presence in the material world, and a lot of people that connect with their truth through meditation and detaching from things as well, they disconnect from the world and they become less relevant. And I just moved into a new place here in Middle Park, and there's a Hare Krishna temple nearby.
So awesome.
Yeah, and they dance. At the moment, their temple's closed, and they dance along the side of the beach. There's the beach there. And last night I went down and just joined them and danced for a while with them, and I was talking about this idea of relevance and detachment and getting the balance right. And I feel like you have
Hmm.
that balance really, really well down pat, because you're super relevant. You're gorgeous. You really embrace beauty as well, and you embrace success, but you
Yeah.
you do so in a really connected way. Can you talk about how you strike the
Sure.
balance?
I mean, I don't know if you found this, but for me, there's been phases of my awakening, phases of the spiritual growth, phases of everything. And it went to that phase where I wanted to renounce everything. I got really into like wearing only white, even though I'm in white today, but like, you kind of like renounce everything and you kind of like, it's almost like you kind of go way out in the extreme. I remember going
Yeah.
really way out in the extreme in my spirituality. And then, the pendulum comes swinging back in and somehow you find, which is really the law of the universe. There's an equanimity that it comes to, that there is an
Yes.
balancing, which we're really, really going through. That's what this whole thing's happening right now in the world. And I think for each and every one of us, what we teach is I'm in the New Thought movement in that I teach metaphysics and universal law and a very
Mm.
kind of specific lineage. And we teach divine expression. So yes, there's people that are perfect in their own way of, say, the Buddhist monks that go off to Tibet monks or something, and they, renounce everything and they become one with their, kind of tribe, if you will. And there's all different expressions of what it means
Yeah.
to be spiritual. For me, my unique expression is to be of the material world. And I think that there's a place as a teacher, we find our place of where it is that we're kind of bringing people over the bridge. Some people are very religious and they're taking very staunch religious people and they're hoping they're pulling them over the bridge into being a little bit more open-minded, if you will. There's people that
Yeah.
are kind of taking that woo-woo kind of spiritualism and we're bringing order and discipline to their lives, right? There's all different types.
Mm.
And for me, I have a specific genre and I love material things. I think it's beautiful, the aesthetics and
Mm.
even makeup. And I love it. And I think we can have both, but I think we have to have responsibility in it as well, of course.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And one way that I've reconciled this recently is it's not about what's right, as if there's like something that's right and there's other things that are wrong. It's just about what's relevant. And what's relevant is different person to person. And what's relevant for you is this beautiful combination of all these attributes and flavors that make you the unique version that only Erin can be.
Yeah, we call it living our truth or relative truth. There's ultimate truths and there's relative truths. And what's relative for you is your own, you get to live in your own universe. Everyone gets to live in their own universe in this universe.
Yeah, amazing. So how did you mentioned that you were navigating this journey and your pendulum swinging, and what for you have been some of the most powerful practices for you
Oh
to
man.
navigate this journey?
One, it's been such a freaking dream. I'm sure for you too, right? It's like this big, like once you get the taste of truth and awakening, you're like, wow, this is like, it's like the best drug on this planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you start expanding consciousness, you turn on super abilities and you're like, whoa, what are we capable of, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I went through, I've been doing this since, I'm going to date myself, but I was 22 when I had my stillborn son and I began my journey and I
Mm,
began kind of dabbling in things like different conferences, landmark, like kind of the basics of 101 of kind of beginning to do transformational work. And then you kind of like evolve into, I did shamanism, got my 9 rights in shamanism. I did the entire bridge of Scientology outside of the church because I didn't like the church. I went and
wow.
did a bunch of Greek oracle processes. And then I became a spiritual practitioner and a minister of metaphysics and then doctor of divinity. So it's been a 25-year journey of seeking truth. And, what a freaking amazing journey. I always think about that, like that quote where it says, at the end of life, it's not about, it's like you slide into home base and your body's all used up and you're like all worn out and you're like, that was a freaking ride. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's where I want to be when I, going out of here. I don't want to be all like, oh, we stay all safe and, like, it's cool, but there's a whole world out there to go venture.
Yeah, and that's a common thread that I'm seeing with so many people that I interview, and I feel it within myself as well. It's just this excitement for the game of life. It's like,
Mhm.
and that doesn't mean that we're just always, well, I'll speak for myself. It doesn't mean that I'm always just like, yeah, bring it on. Sometimes I'm loathing and going through some massive unstressing, and
Totally.
sometimes I'm
Mhm.
going through,
Right
yeah,
now.
you are.
Don't you feel like right now it's like people are needing to get grounded and like really simplify and like breathe this process?
Yeah, well, it's the unavoidable. Or for a lot of people, I've found, because I catch up with a, a more material focused business group every month. They're not mega into spirituality or personal development. They're really sweet guys though. And, there's so many comments and learnings around embracing family and slowing down and enjoying life more. And then when things opened back up here, it was almost they didn't have the same excuse to have that time off, and they're like, damn, now it's in lockdown again. So it's, yeah, I can feel that in the world, that it's a beautiful opportunity for people to reflect and slow down.
Mm-hmm. God will do for us, or the universe will do for us what we can't do for ourselves. So,
Yeah.
always perfection, only perfection in this life.
Yeah. And I find that goes really well with the quote of the God always gives us what we need, but not always what we want. And I'm curious to know, with some vulnerability from you, like what's something recently that that's not necessarily a preference that you've been dealt, where something hasn't gone
I
your
just
way?
had a hysterectomy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, and for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's where you have your uterus and your ovaries and everything taken out of your
Yeah.
body. And I'm very much an alternative medicine person. I'm very much about not, doing as much as you can to align with Mother Nature. And it was a very, very difficult decision for me. And I had so much prejudice around hysterectomies myself, and therefore the universe will usually, if you have a judgment towards something, it will usually bring that exact thing into your life. So be careful what you judge, right? So I was faced with it, and because just to get a little bit real and raw here, I was bleeding, like I was almost hemorrhaging. I would not stop because I had fibroid tumors in my uterus. And there are some alternative things you can do, but mine were so advanced that it was pretty much like it was a real dance. If I wanted to try and do an alternative, I could have potentially had to go into emergency room and get blood trans, and it could have been a disaster. So that was something that I had to like surrender to. And a week after, it's only been 2 weeks since I had the surgery, but it was a week after, my body I couldn't even tell I'd had a operation.
Wow.
And I feel better than ever.
Wow. And so what was the learning for you through that? That's incredible.
So
Thanks for the
many,
vulnerability, by the way.
yeah, I think so many things of just recognizing that we can't judge what other people have gone through, or even what science says, or anything. We need to listen to the intuition within and really honor. And sometimes it's scary to do things, and sometimes there's not always a clear path. I mean, I think that we often have it, especially in the spiritual world, that it's going to be a hell yes or a hell no, and we follow our bliss and sacrifice accordingly. And it's not always the case. Sometimes there are pros and cons with the decisions that you make, and sometimes you have to make hard decisions in your life.
Yeah, one of my favorite words, it's a bit of an inside joke with my friends because I say it all the time, is discernment. And I feel like the reason it's important is because, especially online in this influencer space, everyone's preaching such extreme messages, and they're absolutes on the whole spectrum of the polarity of a certain message. So it could be like, courage is the only way, or, it's about the hustle, or it's about, live a life of complete joy. But it's not always like, if there's joy,
wear a mask or don't wear a mask, or, yeah, it's way extreme. It's not my way. It's not my way at all.
Yeah. But one thing that I have battled with, and I'd love to get some tips from my own learning, that's something I forgot to put in our intentions before we jumped on the call. I want to learn from this, and you're definitely someone that can teach me so much, is I've got some pleaser codes. So growing up, my strategy to navigate through like my upbringing and whatever was to just be as nice as I can, so that I can avoid, it serves me a lot, but it keeps me from being my absolute most authentic self sometimes. Cause I don't like to rattle the cage too much. And sometimes I don't own the things that I think the people that I care about might not respect, which might be like what you were talking about there. You said you had prejudice against the decision for that surgery. There's lots of things that I feel aligned to at this stage of consciousness that other people that are in the conscious community would judge, and I haven't yet fully reconciled and been okay with being able.
Let's go to the closet right now. What is it?
Yeah.
Let's talk. Let's dive into this right now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So there's a few. I think one is like being willing to be okay being seen. Like for me, I love being seen. And I think it was because when I was younger, I didn't feel seen. And so I developed after I started to have more confidence in the world, I developed I love being seen. And so what happened was, when I kind of went through lots of growth, where when you first met me is when I was kind of at this stage where I'd produced lots of financial success and wasn't okay with not being seen. And therefore it was like a mega attachment and I realized that I was driven from so much insecurity to get validated from my dad, from my childhood. And now I've kind of navigated through to the other side of it, where I meditated and I let go of being seen and I let go of everything, but I didn't feel like I had joy resonating in my heart, because I'd also almost like demonized the part of myself, which are my ego and my authentic expression. And then recently, like doing this podcast, for example, I fucking love doing this. I love being on podcasts. I love doing podcasts. I love speaking. I love being seen. I love preaching messages that I care about, and people there jumping out and being like, I love that, or I don't agree with that, or I agree with that. I just like being the center of attention. And I feel like it's something that I intellectually know that it's okay, but then I don't feel that way in my body. I don't fully own it and accept it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we're not going to fully do the process right now, but this is a perfect example of where we would be doing some of the actual trauma work. And the reason why trauma work, so as I began to journey down the rabbit hole of truth for, it's been 25 years now, one of the things that became the most intriguing out of all of the work was the subconscious reprogramming. And the reason why is because as spiritualists or people that are seeking truth, you can begin to meditate, you can begin to have these completely out of body experiences. You can really see through the veil of life and all these amazing, incredible things. But what I was noticing within myself and with the people around me is they were able to have these great, amazing, expanded experiences and be totally good with everything. But as soon as they came back into their reality, the insecurities would come, the triggers would come, right? So I was like, how is this different? This spiritual realm up here versus our human realm, if you will. And what I found is that we actually really need to deal with the DNA. Because the DNA has all the memory on it, the epigenetics of it, right? So it's all of what, if you would call, our limited identity, all of our past, inherited.
So our DNA stores the past. It's not just it's not just genetics. It's past.
No, it's called, now in science, it's called epigenetics. It's an entire field of science that is proving that
Joe
all
Dispenza
memory
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lineage of science. He showcases it in his work.
Yeah.
But so everything comes through, right? So it's important. So the reason why someone can be really out there and be totally okay with everything, but then all of a sudden they get triggered around when they walk in a room with their father or whatever it may be, it's because there is memory that is living at a DNA level. So our job to be the most empowered, most confident, most express spiritual being is to handle our DNA, to complete the cycles of the DNA, to keep what works, like beating the heart and doing all the chemical equations of the body, and being able to remember things like not having to think of every time we take a step, because if there's memory that we want in the body, right? But there's a lot of memory that we don't want. We don't want the memory of getting reactive towards our father or our mother or our friends, whatever that may be. So this is where trauma work is so important, because we don't know where a reaction is coming from. It might be, some trauma that's happening in the child here, but we also do past life traumas. It can be something that's stemming from way deep down in there that happens. And the subconscious mind gets programmed basically three ways. It gets programmed through frequency, we know that, but it gets programmed through high states of frequency. So that means high states of emotions. The moment you place a positive or negative meaning on anything, you instantaneously create an emotion, right? So the minute that there's a traumatic incident, you've got high state of a negative state of emotion. It opens up the subconscious mind, and then we command something into a limited belief. I'll never be accepted. My dad doesn't love me. I'm out of here. I'm different. It doesn't matter anyway, whatever that is. And the subconscious mind just says, and so it is. And so every time we come back in that realm around our father or something, all of a sudden we feel like something, he doesn't accept me. You know what I mean? Because it's triggering that same memory that
Mm.
the job of the subconscious mind is to do that, right? So
Mm.
dealing with the subconscious mind is super important to be able to rid that and be able to find what is Ryan's totally authentic expression of him being seen and being totally okay with it, and no longer having that consideration of what's going on from a friend perspective or a father perspective or whatever that is. It gets to let go, right?
Yeah.
So that's super important. Just to complete the cycle, the other way of program the subconscious mind is through ecstatic state of emotion. So we call it spoken word, or you can do it through drum circles, or some people take medicines, not my way, but to get into an ecstatic state and to declare the truth, right? So we do that through, I do it through affirmative prayer, things like that. And then the third way of reprogramming subconscious mind is through habitual ways and spiritual practice, slowly opening up the consciousness and allowing to see new perspectives and allowing
So like meditation?
Sure, meditation,
Yep.
absolutely, or repetitive ways of beginning to, slowly reprogram the subconscious mind. So through high negative states, through high states of positive states, and through basically expanding consciousness.
Beautiful. Thanks for that.
Yep.
And so what tips do you have for me?
Back to being seen. So back to being seen, right?
Yes.
So when you're in that state of that knowingness and knowing this is authentic for you, the next time you begin to get triggered, notice your inner dialogue and what is that. But ideally, obviously, we want to take you through some trauma so that it just releases and neutralizes those mental pictures around anything traumatic.
Yeah.
But another way is to become aware in those moments and realize, what do you tell yourself? I'm never going to be accepted by my father, or whatever that command is, like a whisper under the voice, and know that that is a command that happened, that most likely happened during some trauma.
Yeah, I think for me, like when it comes up in different contexts and there's different content, but the same language would come up around. If I do lots of this kind of witnessing myself when I feel certain emotions, and I just try to feel it and allow it to come up and let go, but there's still deep embedded things that stay there. And the language usually for me is, am I doing well enough? Am I doing good enough? And so like that, or it could be something like, what am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? So like, let's say, for example, I'm like, oh, I want to do a live on this topic. And then I go do the live and I'm like, hang on, is the live the right thing to do? Is that ego? Is that it? And then I can overanalyze sometimes when I'm more in my kind of stressor state. So that's the sort of language that comes up.
Sure. So that's another practice. So as a spiritual practitioner, one of our principles that we practice is to not evaluate. No evaluation. And the reason why is because it means we're questioning our own truth, right? So we don't evaluate ever this versus that. We get down to what is our true commitment, and we live in our commitment world. And from commitment, then it takes away any quandary or any evaluation. So anytime you're getting into that state, like, should I be doing this or should I not, get back down into are you truly committed to in your career? Why are you doing this? And getting clear back down their commitments. And it usually will answer that evaluation conversation.
Yeah, that makes it a lot simpler. Is this in alignment with like William Whitecloud's work? Or is it true?
I don't know who that is, but it's considered New Thought movement. So we have about 1,500 centers around the world that are considered in New Thought. But Louise Hay was the same doctor as I am. It's all in the concept that it all comes from consciousness. So we have the ability through universal law to create heaven or hell, depending on how we use it. We can create the same energy that creates scarcity, creates abundance, the same energy that creates whatever. So everything's from mind. Everything is a mental universe.
Is that essentially everything is subjective? Like
everything's subjective. And the
label
subconscious mind is the subjective mind is one with the divine mind that outpictures this entire universe.
Yeah.
So there's always a mental equivalent of whatever's going on.
What was the biggest thing that you've learned? Thank you for addressing my trauma trigger.
But we'll have to go into the E4 trauma method and say what those steps, if you went through a process, what the steps are and why you go through those.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'd love to learn more about that process. I've got a segue question quickly though, but I just want to say thanks for seeing me.
Yeah.
And that is, what do you would, because I know you obviously look up to Louise Hay a lot. What do you see as Louise Hay's like most beautiful human quality?
Oh man, I think she was a brilliant woman in that she recognized at that point in history that people were not, they were moving away from religion and they
Mm,
were moving towards the self-development world. And she was smart enough to recognize that if she wanted to get the work out to the world, she needed to do it through things like books and through community and that, instead of kind of narrowing it down into where she stemmed from, which was science and mind centers, which had nothing to do with Scientology. But she studied under Ernest Holmes and under a lineage that is a great lineage. But I think that her human capacity to, her story, her book, You Can Heal Yourself, it was 20 years before it became a New York Times bestseller.
so crazy.
So her belief, her faith, her
Mhm.
commitment was unshakable, and that for me is, I mean, how can you not adore that in somebody?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. I feel like the way that I see it at this stage is that there's all you can't escape the the gap between like if you're in alignment with the universe and you get an intuitive hit, it still takes you being willing to enter the unknown, which takes surrender or courage, whatever you want to call it, to be able to trust or know or have faith or whatever it is. You still need to, as a human, be able to navigate through that discomfort and that non-familiar, where that growth lies and where that next stage of the path lies. And I feel as though, so this is a huge gap for so many spiritual, people that are connected to religion or the universal spirituality. It's just that ability just for them to back themselves and just go, you know what, like I trust. Well, you just got to trust that little bit more and trust yourself that you can, and God, it's that little bit more so that you can surrender and just take that leap into the unknown. And you mentioned a decision that you had to make recently where you had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think helps you make those calls? Like for you, that little willpower thing. We touched on
Yeah.
it earlier, but I'd love to.
For me, it's not actually, it's harder to resist my truth. I know when I'm not living my truth. And what we're talking about is Good Morning La Land. So I have a show called Good Morning La Land for anyone's watching. And I've had to let it go. It may come back, you never know, but it was a huge, huge decision. It's a pretty recognized show. I am the owner of the show, and the show was kind of going in a direction that was not totally in alignment with my heart in total truth and total consciousness and total spirituality that I'm 1,000% committed to. And so for me, I don't think it takes courage to follow your truth. I think it is harder to not live your truth.
Mm,
And it's letting go, but you get used to letting go of things. Like if
yeah,
I'm not living my truth, I know that I can hold on to everything in my world, but I'm going to be miserable in the process. And I've
yeah,
done that before. So for me now, not living my truth or not letting go of things is way harder than letting go of them by a long shot.
yeah. And that shows so much of your, that you've done the work. In other words, like you've really kept developing yourself and kept trusting more and developing your relationship with the divine. And people, but I would say for people when they start, they do need courage because they haven't yet got the track record of when I trust my gut
Oh,
feel or intuition, I know it's going to work out, and it takes that
yeah, I
evidence.
mean, letting go of like some people have to let go of a home. Maybe they're having financial issues and it's not in the highest good for their family and for themselves to hold on to that home because they need to get freed up. The universe is saying, we want you to get free. There's something more here for you. And they're holding on because it's their identity, or they're holding on to a relationship that really is not serving anyone anymore. And it could be totally dysfunctional. I know I've been there before, and it's really scary because you feel like you're going to fail and you feel like, what's the world going to think and all that. Or maybe it's a corporate job or a job that it pays well or whatever, but you can't give it up because you worked your whole life and you went to college for it and you went all these things, but it doesn't feel right. And to give up those things are so scary because it's giving up an identity. But
Yeah.
as you know, the entire work of spirituality, we're really doing two things and two things only in spirituality. We're coming back to the true identity, the I am. So you have to let go of all identity, and it can be the hardest work you'll ever do in your life. And you are, number two, you're no longer placing your power out into the world. So that is called spiritual warrior. That is the
Love
hardest
that.
work you'll ever do. It is the hardest work to let go of your identity in this world, let go of your titles, let go of the way the world thinks you should be, and the way you think you're only good enough, or you're only wanted if you're that way, you're only valued if you have enough money, you're only, you're the title on your social medias and all that crap. Like, when you let that go, there is a freedom beyond there, and then you can have anything once you let it go.
So what does that look like more viscerally and tangibly when someone's letting go of everything that they know? How do they come to have everything after that? For those that are listening saying, cool, thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
I'm going to let go of all the things. It's the things that it's the things that you need to let go of deep down, right? You're not just letting go of things for no reason and just like, all right, I'm going to let go of everything. It's like what I feel attached to.
I think it's such a good question, and I think it sums up in a conversation I had the other day about with a dear friend from India around money and prosperity. And there's a concept that that money is a little bit of a destiny, in that whatever you truly believe at a core level, whatever is meant to find you will find you, and whatever's meant to go away will go away. If you believe at a core level your worthiness of whatever that is. But the truth is that when you let it all go of what you thought life was, and what you thought your identity was, and what you thought your bank account meant, or your title meant, or your house meant, or your relationship meant, or any of that stuff, or the size of your pants, or, you know what I mean? Like your, whatever that is for yourself. Okay. When you let go of all that, for me personally, it was really scary. And I didn't know where you don't see the light and where that's going, but where it went for me.
Can you give an example of what
I
were
had
you
to
letting
give up
go
a
of?
big home, for example, right?
Okay,
Like, it
cool.
was 2008. I gave the house back to the bank. It was really scary. It was a huge identity for me. I'd worked for years and years and years to get to the place where I could have a 7,400 square foot home on a signature golf course and have jets and all this stuff, right? I had to let it go.
Wow.
But what was on the other side of that was really surrendering to my mission and calling, that I needed to be in Los Angeles to take it to the level that I needed it to be at. Wow. And I had to let all that go and everything. And the world that I have now is a million times better, in that I'm living from purpose, right? And when we get that, we have all of it. When you walk into a place, or you walk into the world, it's all of ours. You walk, like, think about the internet right in front of us. How much money would it take for you personally to develop the internet? Trillions of dollars? It's ours. We get it. And when you open up your consciousness and you recognize it's all yours, having a little home that's worth millions of dollars is nothing compared to what you can have when you really open your eyes and open yourself to the construct of the globe.
Yeah, this is really interesting, because I've thought about this for a while in relation to the Royal Melbourne Botanical Gardens. There's this set of gardens in the city, and if you go to Melbourne and you go to these gardens, they're just like the most incredible. There must be like 1 million different species of plants, and it's just crazy. There's like 4 different lakes in there. It's just incredible, and I love being in this place. And for me, I used to really want to have this massive home because I wanted to own it. But I would never be able to afford in that location a thing that is like as incredible as that. And I can access it for free every day.
Exactly.
And so many people are addicted to these labels. Like, you could walk into an amazing hotel in the city, which is more incredible than a house you'd most likely ever be able to afford. And you can just enjoy it for free. So where do you think, where does it come from, this wantingness to own
you could also recreate a big home and have that as well.
Yeah.
But when we open our eyes and we let go of the only way, if we call it outlining, if we try and control how things show up exactly, we're not allowing the universe to do its job. The universe only knows abundance. It wants to give you more than you could ever even think of. Yeah. And that was a perfect example of those gardens. You now
Yeah.
can walk into gardens that, what would it take for you to build a home and be able to have that yard there, whatever. And some people might think, well, but it's not yours and not in your right backyard. Who cares? It's all
Yeah.
of ours.
Yeah. So what would you say then to someone, because I was discussing this point last night with my ex on the phone. Like we have these like little wisdom session chats, and we're talking about the idea of like, she was listening to Gabby Bernstein talking about when you let go, then the universe provides. And you were saying outlining, and I'm guessing the metaphor is like, because if you outline, then you're trapped in the circle of what you've outlined and you can't go beyond that, because your view's kind of like singled out and narrow, and you miss the rest. But I catch up with guys regularly that come from force and they work their ass off. And I know that there's a big gap of fulfillment for a lot of these guys that I'm friends with, and some girls, but they do have massive wealth, like net worths, just massive net worths, and really
Mhm.
rich. And they've done it through force. They've done it through courage, hard work, not
Mhm.
mega passionate, not mega fulfilled, but they've got more money than most people. So what would you
I'm
say?
all about, I mean, there's nothing wrong with building wealth, and I love money. Don't get me wrong. I like expensive things. I just bought a new Range Rover. I love all of it. But the issue is we know through the Harvard studies that money does not equate to happiness. Money does not equate to fulfillment. In fact, the
Yeah.
studies are that $70,000 is where, beyond $70,000, and I'm sure for LA it'd be more like $200,000, right? But say $70,000 for the average person. It doesn't, if you're below that, of course, it's going to be stressful. You're not going to be able to have the basics of life. But beyond $70,000, they found that it doesn't make a difference of how happy or fulfilled somebody is. And trust me,
Yeah.
I've worked with top CEOs and top celebrities, and it does not mean that you're going to be happy and fulfilled. The goal is not, and I think Gary Vee talks about this a lot right now, we need to redefine what it means to be happy and what wealth is. And it really is fulfillment. And so what is it taking for you to be fulfilled and be expressed? And if that is having millions of dollars, great. If it's not, great. But you get to decide what your expression is and what
Yeah.
that is versus what the culture's told you and what you thought you should do because you're keeping up with the Jones and you're trying to be competitive with your buddies to show them who has a bigger you know what, right? So whatever that is for you, and I'm all for it. I love wealth. I'm the first to say that I love aesthetics and beauty and expensive things, but it doesn't define me, and I can have it or not have it. And sometimes you create a lot of it, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes it flows, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And I think that's the key there is, are you attached to whatever it is at the moment that you really want? Because if you want something and you've got mega attachment to it, and then it gets taken away, and then you feel like a piece of shit, then
Yep.
that's a problem. It's not a problem to have something though. If, like you said, you're cool if you have it, you're cool if you don't. I was not cool without my business that was really successful, that my identity had a huge flag planted in. I was like, this is me. And without that, I'm a nobody and I'm a piece of shit and blah, 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 which was legitimately my truth at that point. And I didn't know any better. That was just my reality. And so I think that's really, really important. So if somebody, like, what would you, because my belief is that, money doesn't make you happy. I've had the money and now I know it doesn't make me happy, but I feel like for a lot of people, they need to find it out for themselves. Is there any way to get around that so that they don't have to see for themselves and go through a period of suffering first in that long
I don't think
pursuit?
so.
Yeah.
I'm always the first to say, like, oh, you're not committed to doing your core work. Great, have at it. Go out there and go try and get fulfilled out there, and go try and
Yeah.
be identified as whatever it is in your world. Have at it. I'll
I
be
feel
there.
like that's solid pull energy. Like as soon as you say that, someone's like, yeah, Erin, I want to work with you, but I just want to make this money. And you're like, cool, go off and do it. And they're like,
Have fun.
hey, hang on a second.
And I'm all, again, look, I work with a lot of women, and I'm, help them break through to prosperity. And it's important. Money is important because it's expression, it's freedom, it's power. We get to create amazing things with it. So I'm all about money. But when it comes from an identity and attachment, from an insecurity, or from something that's really not authentic, it just doesn't work, period.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you then say for the dudes and chicks that are doing businesses that they're not that passionate about, and the role that they're playing in the business, they don't actually like that much. So
I'd say, how about,
yeah,
I would never tell them to not do whatever,
because they
unless they
have,
were like,
but they have at it and they build wealth. And I really would love to, help them step into passion, but I just don't feel like they're ready.
yeah, I think that I would never, I think I went through that phase like years ago, trying to fix people and trying to have them see the light and everything. And then you realize like, no, it's really cool. They're having a human experience and they're never going to know. They're never going to get to that next place until they fully experience. And I realize that we're all going through exactly the suffering that we need to go through in order to get to the place where we have a relative experience of that. So they're in the perfect position right now for them to experience. And it may be the whole lifetime. They want to just experience that relative feeling of not fully being fulfilled. And maybe it's going to be a hard reality when they're on their deathbed and they're realizing like, shit, I don't get to take any of this with me, and I really didn't totally enjoy my life. So, shit, that sucks. But maybe they need to learn it in that hard lesson at the end of their life.
Yeah, because the best lessons come with blood.
Sometimes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So, what do you recommend for chicks that are? Or you say you coach a lot of women, guys or girls that are starting out on their kind of like most passion, like let's say someone's not doing what they want, but they're aware that they don't want to do that. They're aware that they're in a business to make money, or they're in a job that they don't like, and they kind of have a gut feel or some intuition flowing through of what they want to do next. How would you say that they should navigate getting to there? I know it's different with every person, but
No, it's actually, we have a formula. It's very simple. It's a 3-step formula to discovering your purpose and calling in life. And is it the truth? No, but it's worked for thousands of clients I've worked with, okay? So
awesome.
number one is your triumph. And so what we do is you really can't birth your purpose until you've gone. So you can't really birth your purpose until you've done your trauma work, because through the trauma work, you recognize what you needed to learn, all the suffering, you chose all the suffering at a subconscious spiritual level. And in completing those cycles and having the triumph, you are actually completing your DNA cycle, but you're one with everyone on the planet. So it actually becomes a mission for people through their triumph, whatever they've had to overcome.
So that's step one. It's going, what I come into the world, and the philosophy is I chose this life to go through the hardship and the suffering that I've had to go through to learn certain lessons, to get to a point where I understand what those lessons are. That's the triumph. And now I'm ready for step two.
So step 2 and 3 is about discovering your passion. So what is it that you truly want? So because say, for example, the first step, someone has triumph over codependency, for example.
Can you do this with me quickly?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it right now. Okay, cool.
Let's do it now.
Even though I think you're already living on your purpose and calling, but it'll help maybe hone it a little bit more.
Exactly.
Of who you work with, right?
And hopefully
so
the
let me ask you this.
helps people. Yeah.
So what is the hardest thing you've ever had to overcome in your life?
I think there's been multiple, but I'd say the first one was being able to get out of my dad's grip. Like my mom left when I was 13, and I was left with my dad, and he was very controlling. And then when I was at the end of high school, I left home, and that was leaving home to forge my own way was probably one of the hardest things that I've had to do.
So what would you say is the lesson in it?
It's a good question. And I've reflected on, I've done trauma work around it a lot, but I haven't asked myself the big question. So I think the lesson in it is that you need to choose what you need to know your own worth and choose your own path.
Great. Okay. So second is passion. What is it that you love to do? If you won the lottery today, you never had to work for money the rest of your life, what would you do? How would you spend your time? What would you do?
I'd say it'd be a combination between chatting with people, conversations to do with spirituality, growth, business, life, philosophy, and chasing waterfalls. and spiritual ceremonies, like catching up, cacao ceremony, tarot cards, oracle cards, just chats with people, intention setting,
Great.
singing,
Mm,
kirtan.
great. And then lastly, what would you say is your skill set? Like, what is your actual skill set? What would you say you're really good at?
I'd say speaking from the heart and being courageous.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy as well, strategizing how to make something work.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, for me, I just heard exactly what your business model is. So, you know,
Yeah.
out of that, what would you say is like, if you were to give yourself advice looking in on that conversation, what kind of a business would you say, okay, Ryan, this is clearly what you're meant to do?
Yeah, I think like what I learned from that, and thank you for facilitating, creating a space for some value for me on this. So even though the whole thing's valuable for me,
Mm.
I'd say the learning that I get is that I need to prioritize more time in nature and incorporate it as part of my business as well. Because I say it regularly, but it's something that sometimes just gets put to the side. But when I'm in it, I'm in so much joy. Like if I'm climbing trees or in finding a waterfall or exploring through a jungle, it's that traveling and adventuring aspect. And I think that really just, I don't exactly know how it's incorporated, but it just needs to be done and then figured out on the way.
Mhm. Well, I think it's brilliant. And the reason why is because I think that men in particular learn through doing and through, they're much more tactile than women were much more analytical and emotional, you know. So I think that
Yeah.
to take men out into transformation and have them find themselves and have them, you know, have ceremony to let go of what their culture and their parents and their dads in particular told them
Mm.
and release it through ceremony. I think it's the greatest gift you could ever give somebody on this planet. I think that you have a total business
Mm.
there, and I think it's much needed. And I think the men's movement has not even begun. I think it's going to be a huge movement. And I think so many men are ready for it. They're trying to find their way after the Me Too movement and just everything. And
Yeah, it's a good
they're
point.
dying. They're really hurting inside.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I actually just let go of my men's work program, which is crowding of the kings. And I think it was because of the type of person that I was attracting through it. So I feel like yeah, that's interesting. Like running those retreats, I think that's something I need to feel into more,
Mhm.
and I'll keep you posted on it. Thank you for
Cool.
that.
Amazing. Really excited for you.
Yeah, but that
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense though, because that incorporates everything, like going into the jungle
Yeah.
and doing those ceremonies.
It
You
doesn't
know,
mean it has to all be out in the jungle. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
when
yeah,
generally a men's group will meet, you know, whatever at a place or online, and then they go on a retreat also, you know, it can be a mixture of all those.
yeah. It's interesting because I just kept getting called men's group or like men's work. You should serve men, and I feel as though like I love working with men, but I feel like I attract a lot of women as well that I love working. Like I love chatting with you, for example, and I
Mhm.
reckon at least 50% of the people that I connect with through the podcast that I just love chatting with are women. Uh, so yeah, there's obviously some
Oh,
crazy
yeah. And
combination.
we'll have like, we create, you know, how people create their avatar, and your avatar might be a man, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't also attract women. Like my avatar is a woman of who I help and our model for a business, but we have a few men also. So it doesn't mean you have to
Mm,
say no to whoever, but you still are speaking, and that's really your mission, and it will attract whoever it's supposed to attract.
yeah, cool. Love that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for creating the
Yeah.
space for me on this.
Mm-hmm.
So what?
Always fun.
So I got a question for you. What if you were to talk with friends and get together with a bunch of girls or guys or friends and be talking about a topic that you just can talk about forever, and it's like one of your favorite topics to talk about? For me, it's relationships.
Mhm.
Like I don't know. I just love talking about relationships and spirituality. What for you do you just love talking about?
You know, I love my soul-based entrepreneur girlfriends. And quite frankly, we talk about business a lot
Yeah.
because we're creating and like what could we create and different ways of creating and all of that. I guess just because it's really just right now, the chapter in my life, because I've been
Yeah.
through so much spiritual stuff and so much relationship stuff. And I think it's just the chapter of my life. I don't think it's something like the theme of what I'd want to talk to forever, but I do think there's chapters of what really our conversation is wherever
Yeah.
we go, because it's really where we're trying to seek and like what's really
It's
going
relevant.
on for us and what we're really trying to dive into consciously and fully understand as
Yeah.
regards all our relationship, how we relate to it. So for me right now, I'm
Awesome.
just really interested in business, quite frankly.
It's like I've gone the opposite.
Right?
I love business as well, but the business thing, I kind of like how you embodied spirituality. Like I just embody business, and now
Mm-hmm.
like I'm excited to talk about spirituality because it's relevant. So for you within the business scope, like what's one of the most exciting epiphanies that you've had recently?
I'm developing the women in Soul Society, the group I run. Some of them are in leadership program, just understanding how to develop their business, and others get certified in as spiritual coaches. They get certified in my trauma method, E4 trauma method, and they're actually getting certified because I made a partnership with Emerson Theological, and they get trained as spiritual practitioners and ministers. And so one of the things I'm really loving in business is they're actually beginning to lead within the community. So it's really interesting to watch kind of the like return on investment, if you will. You know, it's like if you invest in something, then all of a sudden the residual income starts coming in. And doing that in relationship and in community, how do you build a community that grows exponentially
Mm-hmm.
beyond just you?
Yeah, I love.
Beyond the soulpreneur, right? And how that's like the most exciting thing right now for me, because how do I have to grow so much to be that leader. I have to grow
Yeah,
so much to put structure to it, but then also allow people to have their expression in it. And
yes.
like, so that's the conversation I'm in right now.
That's cool because that's what you said was like you looked up to most in Louise Hay as well. And it's actually what's exciting you most at the moment. So it's cool to see how you're taking something from someone that you look up to massively and then embodying it and embracing it in your own life.
Yeah, it's a development. You know, Ray Dalio is another one. He's not quote, quote, so spiritual, but he runs the largest hedge fund in the world. And his book on principles is really that. It's like, how do your principles at work to build an organization with so many people? And as a spiritualist, I think it's important. The primary relationship is with your higher self. And when you get that tight and right, if you will, then the next level is to get really good in relationship all over. And for me, it's not, you know, for years as a woman, I was so obsessed with that one relationship, that intimate relationship, and that's great. But there's a whole world beyond that type of relationship that can be so fulfilling and deep and meaningful and transformative. And so I think also it's a time in my life, my son's grown, I've had a hysterectomy, you know, doesn't mean I don't want intimacy in a partner. But at the same time, it's like the universe again. If we put the blinders on, we think it can only come from one person, we're limiting what it means to have love and relationship. And when you
Yeah.
open up, it can come from so many amazing people and so many great sources out there.
Yeah. Well, I hope you still give a lucky man the gift of your unionship because you're a catch. So,
Yeah.
so we haven't discussed it yet, but I actually want to understand how your E4 trauma method works. And I'd love to wrap up with, I've got one more question after that. So can you
Okay, great.
explain how the process works? Because I
Yeah.
know lots of different healing methods and I'd love to understand your special method.
Yes. So I like to use the computer analogy first about it. So if we're very much like a computer. The subconscious mind works just like a computer. So if you're looking at your computer right now or phone, you can touch it. It's called the hardware. The body is the hardware, the bones and neurons, all that stuff. Inside of your computer is what's the software. It can get glitches in it, can be upgraded, downgraded, Inside of us, we have belief systems. That's our programming. Our programming comes from our epigenetics, the memory of our lineage. It also comes from the program we see in the culture, our parents, and so on and so forth, okay? Then our computer might have memory, right? So it can have good memory, a lot of memory, not a lot of memory. We have memory at every cellular level. We also have Akashic records. Every mental picture that's ever existed all of time lives in us at some level. Every memory from our lineage of our ancestors lives in us at every memory. So just like your computer gets glitches in it, gets a little spinning ball, a little slow, has too many tabs open, it gets a
I
little
call it the
confused,
spinning wheel of death.
right? Yeah, it doesn't have great Wi-Fi system.
Yep.
all kinds of things. Same thing happens with us. We don't have good connection to source. We're not gonna have good Wi-Fi. We haven't completed all the cycles of our trauma. We start getting a little confused and overwhelmed. Our life doesn't work. We start getting memory lapses because we have too much going on at a psyche level. So what do we do with the computer? We pull up the tabs, we complete the cycle, we save it, we delete it, we file it, we throw it out, we clear the cache, we reboot it, we do whatever. Same with us. In the subconscious mind work, we pull up all the trauma and we complete the cycle. Because if trauma work hasn't been completed, it keeps trying to run its tab, keeps pulling up stuff, and it keeps going over and over again. It doesn't give us the freedom of choice to be present in here and now. Okay?
I've got a really quick question for you on that. Like, how can someone recognize if they've got trauma? Is it that they get reactive? Is it triggers? Like, how do you recognize?
You could definitely triggers. Like if somebody says something and all of a sudden you get that feeling, that's trauma.
What about for the people that are like really kind of driven, numb businessmen that kind of think they've got all their shit sorted and just block everything out?
Yeah.
I guess they're not ready. A lot of the times they're not ready to heal.
The reality is everybody has trauma. Trauma is not like if you're in a war or if you got hit by a car. Trauma is emotionally charged instances, and it's relative. A kid can look at you on the jungle gym in 5th grade and you can have trauma from it because you got really upset. Yeah. Everybody has trauma.
Yep.
Maybe there's 1% of the population that doesn't have trauma.
The question I have is like, yeah, I know these guys have the trauma, but they're kind of ignorant to it, you know? Like you'd say like, oh, do you have to work through it? No, I kind of need to work through that shit. You know, I've got all my shit sorted.
Yeah.
That's not ready to heal.
Have at it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's pretty clear.
I mean,
cool.
It's limited identity, basically. Do they have limited identity? Do they have programs that are running? Yes. Okay. So what we do is this. It's a 4-step process. And what we do is every memory, it lives as a mental image in a subconscious realm. Okay. And that mental image has charge on it. And if it's charged, then it's basically it's playing.
An emotional charge?
Emotional charge on it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Okay. So what we do is the only thing that can keep charge on a mental picture or keep trauma is 2 things. It is a limited belief or a limited story. It's the meaning we put around that at a subconscious level. Okay. So what we do is we go back into the experience. We re-experience it. So what we do is, number 1, we re-experience the event as if it's happening right now. So you don't go back and you go, well, it was 1995 and no. So there I am, I'm in the room, in walks my dad. He says this, I say that. Okay, so we're re-experiencing it. That's the number 1 thing, okay? Number 2 is evaluation, no evaluation. I got upset when he said that because, no evaluation of it. We're as the Veda's saying, we're as-ising it. So no evaluation. I walked in, he said this, I said that. And you're fully experiencing it. So
what'd you say with the Vedas?
The Vedas, the as it is the hashtag of the Vedas, if you will. Because as is everything. Yep. Life has choice and your freedom. If you just as is it, okay?
I am totality.
So you're re-experiencing it. You're not evaluating it. Number 3 is emotions. You fully feel whatever emotions are there. One of the reasons why trauma stays on the track is because what we resist persists. So if you constantly get upset about it, re-energize it, resist the emotion of it, it just stays in your psyche. So we're going to fully feel whatever emotions there, feel the anger, feel the sadness, feel whatever's there, express it, and just experience that emotion. And then number 4 is what we call enlightenment. And it's really having that epiphany. What did you decide in that moment when you were so upset? What did you decide about yourself? What did you decide about others? What did you decide about life? And you begin to look at what you decided right in the middle of that. You may go over this instant 20 times to fully flatten out and neutralize it and just fully feel it and then recognize, oh my gosh, I decided I'll never make him happy to my dad. And therefore, every time I get upset or my dad comes around, I'm like, oh, I can't make him happy anyway. Whatever triggers there, right? Yeah. And then we also spot, what is it that you truly want to declare for yourself? Now that you know, you can declare something new. Okay, so we take those 4 steps. The re-experiencing, no evaluation, that's what we've got E4, and the emotion, enlightenment. And then we do that through past lives as well. Wow. So that's the E4 trauma method.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. That's incredible. So it takes courage to do, right? Because it takes courage, especially especially for a lot of men, to feel the emotion is fucking scary. Like, I know for a lot of my business coaching clients and men that I've worked with, it's like they're being courageous in the action and marketing campaign and risk in business, but then when it comes to actually saying how you feel to your partner, feeling emotion is damn scary. So it takes courage.
Yeah. Well, usually, sometimes it's like they were beat up when they had emotions as a little kid or something, or they were made fun of. And so
Yeah.
therefore they just go, it's not safe to have emotions. And then that's a command. And then that command runs out as that trauma over and over again. And then when they go back in and they spot that, they can release that. And they'll usually, sometimes men won't have emotions right in it. They have a hard time, but then usually like, it'll be like, oh my gosh, in the middle of the night, I started bawling my eyes out. I couldn't believe it. It was like this thing that just started flowing.
Yeah.
And so you just have to trust the process and know it's going to come out whenever it's ready.
Okay. So if you're going through the process, and let's say you were facilitating it for me, and I go back to a memory where I was feeling like super scared or like super sad, but then I'm just like stiff as a board and I won't release any of that. I won't experience any of that emotion. Is there any tips you have for experiencing it? Like, how do you help people surrender into feeling that?
Usually it's just going back into those traumatic incidences where they can tap into that, and when they can spot where they decided to not be emotional. And then once they recognize
Yeah.
that, they recognize that that's really not working for them, it's working against them. And
Wow.
then usually there's some movement. But not everybody has to awaken through having a lot of emotions. Sometimes it happens in different ways. Sometimes they get angry,
Yeah.
sometimes they whatever, and sometimes they have to go through an array of just feeling numb. But the emotions, there is a level of emotions, and apathy, where a lot of them are at, is actually worse than being like sad.
Angry.
Like,
Yeah.
right. So it's actually a safe place for a lot of people, and just to be in
Yeah.
apathy. But when they get the impact of going through life apathetic, I mean, I think it's partly a visualization of a death meditation, I call it. Imagine you're on your deathbed, and what are you going to regret, and really getting clear of what that is. And that sometimes will help
Wow.
shift people to really get like, that would really not be okay for me to not fully, express and love and have deep, meaningful relationships.
Yeah, that's really cool. So if someone's got like not expressing emotion, like start with the trauma around not expressing emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. They usually,
Uh,
they decided, they commanded they were not going to be emotional at some level, probably. Mm-hmm.
yeah, wow. And the idea, so when you get to the end of it, how do you know that you said you might have to go through the process a few times?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when
Sure. What you do is you watch the motion. So the motion will it's sometimes hard to get back. Sometimes they won't remember. Like, I don't really remember everything. No problem. That means the veil of life. The veil of life comes on when we tell ourselves a lie. That's why we remember everything to about 4 years old. And then we don't remember anything after that, before that, because our veil came on, because we bought into a limited belief, a lie. And so same thing happens with trauma. You won't remember part of the incident. And that's where a lie, you told yourself a lie. So
can you
we want
explain
to slowly.
can you explain the veil of life again? It sounds like a really cool
Veil of
concept.
life is memory, is literally memory. So how many people can remember when they're 2 years old? Probably no one, until you've done your work. But most people can't, because the veil of life means that it is basically a division between you and the world. You basically have decided you are something other than the I am, and therefore your actual your viewpoint of it actually
It's
goes
like
away.
your
That's why,
ego lens kind of thing.
yeah, it's an actual, like, if you remember back of something that happened, you're like, I don't really remember. I was on the jungle gym, and then I remember this one part, but I don't remember what happened after that. Technically, you should be able to track everything that ever happened in your entire lifetime and past lifetimes. So if you can't,
Yes.
that means that there are limited beliefs.
Okay. And the limiting beliefs are the veil that's stopping you from remembering.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do then? If you've
You got to keep going in and neutralizing and releasing the limited beliefs and limited identity, and the veil will lift off.
and you'll start to remember more.
Everything. You should be able to track all lifetimes of everyone.
Wow. Because DeMartini talks about this. And have you followed DeMartini at all?
Mm-hmm. He's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, he's awesome. And when I've done his breakthrough experience a few times, and when he does like a neutralization with someone, And he's like, go back, remember when they grabbed the rope? And they're like, he can't remember. And he's like, yes, you can. And he just like grills them, because he's like, you can remember, you know exactly what happened at this moment.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so now it makes sense, because you've got
Mhm.
it stored in you. Okay, so you just have to understand that trauma release is an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing thing, and you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for the collective. So you should be able, when you go into past lives, people think you're just tracking your past lives, but you're actually tracking but you're all past lives. So you should be able to track anything, anywhere. You should be able to close your eyes and be able to go to any single person, any person. All relationships are eternal. That's called enlightenment.
Yeah, wow. So when do you use this? Like, when do you release trauma? Is it when, like, do you do it reactively to when a trigger gets brought up? So you go about your life normally, trigger gets brought up, and then you're like, cool, time to use the E4 trauma method.
I mean, I did most of my trauma for years, so I don't get triggered.
You don't get triggered.
I don't get triggered, but I might have like a little
Sounds like a challenge. I'll come
yeah,
stay at your
right?
place
Yeah.
next time. I'm in LA.
However, what I do have is truth versus not truth,
Sure.
right? So now it's like, something is not sitting right with me because I ain't living my truth, and this is not my truth, and this is not how I want to live. So let's deal with this.
So that's kind of like feedback almost.
Yeah, it's feedback almost versus like a trigger. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's amazing, Erin. Thank you for sharing that. That's super
Yeah.
cool. So how long have you been working on that method for?
Well, I did it for years and years. I worked with a few people with Greek oracle processes. So Socrates Method is based in Greek oracle processes.
Is that
Which is
Socrates?
incredible. Yeah, Socrates. And so basically, it's really is the entire process of Socrates or Socrates, depending on how people
Yeah.
say it, is really asking so many questions and expanding consciousness. So when you start getting to those modalities, and then you start getting into what you're really doing energetically in those things, is you are having a relationship with a perception, and you're keep relating in different perceptions. And so through that, then I was like, well, what if we related to our trauma, and how do we have a breakdown of what this is? And then you take the Vedas, and the Vedas are,
I love the Vedas.
as ising things and neutralizing things. So it's like it all began to like make sense. But so it's been years. I mean, it didn't like come out of like, I'm going to sit down and write up this. It was like, trying everything. It wasn't until I started certifying people and stuff that I was like, how do we get this in such a clear fashion that is like someone just doesn't need to, they can just have this work, and it's just basic. So it was a lot of years,
Yeah, that's really cool that you studied the Vedas, because I studied it a couple of years ago, and I'd done like a lot of mainstream personal development, but it was just the most truthful. It's really weird to describe, because when I learned all these principles, it was the first time I'd learned principles that felt right. It wasn't even about it making sense or not. It's just like they said it, and I was like, yeah, that feels like really good. Whereas usually when I was learning from teachers, they would say things and I go, oh, that's a cool idea. And I'd write it down. That's a cool idea. But I wouldn't be like, that feels like it feels right. And I think that's because of the Sanskrit is onomatopoeic, where it's resonance. There's a resonance to the language where it seeps within you. It's such a beautiful study for anyone that doesn't know Vedic wisdom or the Vedas,
incredible.
the
And it
Bhagavad
wasn't
Gita.
considered a religion. It was just the way of life. It was like science and spirituality. There was no distinction between the two,
Yeah. Well, the Vedas means the truth, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it means the truth. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. Because anyone that's listening, like, highly encourage you next time you go through something, just to sit with yourself. Is it something that people can do with themselves?
Absolutely. They've got to be courageous, though, because usually trauma is like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. It just upsets me even when I think about it.
Yeah.
And the issue is that if you go back in and re-experience that, and if you're not disciplined enough to not tell the story and not re-energize it as being the victim, and not put meaning on it, then you're just going to open up. It's like having, a wound that has a scab on it, and keep picking off the scab. It's not going to work. So you've got to be disciplined enough to just go back in and experience it, and as is it, and fully be with the emotions instead of making meaning around it and creating emotions.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why there was no evaluation, because that helps prevent the victim. Is that correct?
Yep. You just can't tell a story around it. You can't You can't put meaning on it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's super concise, simple. It's a really powerful method. I love that.
Yeah.
So Ez, thank you for jumping on. It's been so much fun. I wanted to honor you before. Still got one more question, but I just want to honor you first and foremost for being such an incredible woman. You're just such a great example of what it means to be a conscious woman in the world. And like I said at the start, I've always felt your radiance, but we haven't spent a ridiculous amount of time together, and I feel your power. It's so strong, and it's the universe flowing through you. It's really beautiful. And just wanted to say thank you for being you as such a light worker in the world. It really is incredible. Where can people find you before I ask my last question?
Oh, yeah. I'm on social media as drerin.tv, which is DRERIN.tv. So I'm a doctor of divinity, just so people know. And I'm across all boards on that. And then I have a podcast as well, Dr. Erin. And then Soul Society is the platform, which has an E on the end. It's like Soul Society with an E on the end, which is SOULCIETE.com. And we've got some great programs up there.
That's amazing. But if you just go to drerin.tv and send Erin a message, say thank you for the podcast. That's always a great way to connect and ask any questions that Erin might do a video on, or then you can be directed wherever from that
we have
place.
so much free content out there, come freebies and all kinds of stuff. So always good to connect. Friends.
Amazing. So my last question, Erin, before we wrap up for today is, if someone came to you and said, Erin, and they're wearing a mask, by the way, they're wearing a mask. They come and say, Erin, you don't know anything about me, but I'm going to give you $1 million for your best tool, tactic, practice. Like, what's one piece of advice that you could give me in exchange for this $1 million? In other words, what's the most powerful thing that you can give someone else, impart on someone else that you've learned on your journey?
I mean, of course, I would say the E4 trauma method, because I've seen miracles happen. I've seen people grow back hair. I've seen backs that were broken get fixed, right? Like I've seen miracles.
Grow back hair in their head.
Yeah, and I've seen everything come out of that. So of course I'd say that. But because we've already discussed that, I want to have a new answer.
Wait, can I quickly say, so did someone come to you bald, and then they came to you with a bald head, and then they did the E4 trauma method, and then they started growing hair again?
They weren't totally bald, but yeah, they were very thinning and their hair started growing back.
Wow, that's incredible. You should put that as like the tagline. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen so many miracles, like physically, obviously, in all areas for sure.
Yeah, it's incredible, but I'm just poking a bit of fun there. But what is the actual then knowledge bomb that you drop if you've already covered the E4 trauma method?
I want to come up with something really sassy and silly or something.
Well, you're stroking your chin like a wise, like a wise person.
$1 million. What would I tell you? I don't know. Maybe I would like just grab the money and run or something like that, because that would be the best lesson I could give them, so that they could get really angry.
Pull a chunk of their hair out.
Because the best gift you could give somebody is kind of like a breakdown, so they can have a breakthrough.
You could pull some of their hair out and just leave an instruction manual for how to do the E4 trauma.
I don't know. Yeah.
Take the money and run, and then they can grow it back.
Honestly, I would probably say, get your ass into an incredible community, because that is probably worth exponentially, a good community that's really has your back. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, that's such a powerful thing, because there was this quote I heard the other day that was like, you can never out execute your environment, or something like that. It was like, you can never outgrow you. You can outgrow you can never like overpower your environment. It's the most powerful force of everything, and it's underestimated.
And if you have an environment and a group that's raising you up, that challenges you, that makes you grow, that has you stay in truth, that like it's more powerful than your individual consciousness, like if you're in a weak state.
Yeah, and I feel for so many entrepreneurs and people that are doing this work, they make it lonely for themselves. Like and like for me as an entrepreneur, I felt so lonely. I remember that was one of the defining moments for me when I was like, something has to change, because I'd had everything that I want. And I felt like and then as some things started to go wrong, I was like, I don't really feel like I've earned the trust. Like Brene Brown talks about with marble jar, like put enough marbles in other people's cups to even receive support when I need it. I just hadn't prioritized community at all. So that's a beautiful answer, Erin. And thank you so much for coming on today. I've had an absolute blast. You're such an incredible woman, and
Oh.
loved connecting with you more today.
Yes,
so much fun.
It's all about service. If you're sad and lonely, get out of your mind and go serve somebody. That's what it's all about.
Send some messages.
That's the secret to life.
Oh, amazing. Thanks, Erin.
Okay, love you so much. Big hugs.
Love you too.
Have a great day.